Hey, y'all. Welcome to another edition of the Marty Smith podcast here at Outsider Studios, just outside of Nashville. And today's show is fantastic. Somebody that I've been intrigued by for a long time because I kind of knew his story. I'd seen that he had played college football in the past at Clemson University. I had certainly been a fan of his work for some time now, Lee Brice. But I never really heard him dive into his college football life, and I never really heard him dive into the path from Sumter, South Carolina, where he grew up, to Clemson University, why he quit playing football, and how he wound up in Nashville, and once he got to Nashville, how he wound up on the radio, and once he wound up on the radio, how he's had all of this success. He's accrued awards. He has gone to the number one position in country radio 7 times. Had a very good career. But where's that career going? I wondered all those things. And Lee came in here and gave us more than an hour and really shared that path with great depth. We laughed a lot. I learned a lot about him. And there's a moment that's going to make y'all laugh out loud that involves his childhood music hero, Garth Brooks. Here's Lee Brice on the Marty Smith podcast at Outsider Studios. First, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to come down here and be with us at Outsider Studios, brother. And
this is nice.
We've been fans for. Isn't it nice?
I love it, man.
They built it just for us. I can't believe it. I want to start with your two loves as a kid: music and ball.
That's it.
So, how did each of those passions develop? Who introduced you to them?
Well,
and how did they develop?
So, music was. It was introduced, I guess, because my family was always singing in church, but there was something a little deeper than that. It was like, from the earliest memories, 2 years old, if I saw piano or anything that made music, I wanted to go sit at it. And my parents didn't even have to wonder where I was, because they could hear me sitting in there as a 2-year-old or 3-year-old whenever, like when mine were that young, you got to watch them like a hawk, because you never know what they're going to get into. But I'm just sitting in there. So music was like this really just born inside me thing, right? That I think it was just kind of, God just kind of, this is what you're going to be. This is going to be your passion for life, no matter what. And then it grew, obviously, the more I was around it, and I sang in church and all this, and I heard the radio, and I was like, I want to sing, so I better start writing songs. And so, I did all that. As I'm 10 years old, 11 years old, I'm producing on a little keyboard and taping and learning guitar and writing songs. Wow. And so, yes, it just continued to grow. And then I started playing out a little bit, got in school and got a little band together, and then moved to Nashville. So, yes, that was a natural progression of something that was more just born in me. And athletics in general, I was always just an athlete. I loved to play everything, anything I get my hands on, from football, obviously, to volleyball, baseball, whatever. It didn't matter. If it was a competition, there was a competitive thing in me. But the truth about football and then in Clemson was a really big deal, because it was really kind of, as a kid, a young kid, my dad heard the stories of Daddy, and how great he was. He was a running back in high school, and he got recruited to play at Clemson, and he decided to stay home and have a job and have us and have a life at home. And so that put this thing in me. I was like, I'm going to play for Clemson one day, as a young child. You know what I mean?
Sumter,
South Carolina, and that's split right down the middle, Gamecocks or Tigers. And even in our family, not our immediate family, but like aunts and uncles, some of them, I don't know how, but a couple of them went Gamecocks. I don't know how that happened, but so yeah. So Daddy that was probably the biggest root of kind of instilling that, and why I wanted to do that for him. And then when I started playing, like, it's funny now, because my son it's his first year playing football, and he's in 7th grade. He's just learning his positions. The coaches are going, well, he could be really he could be a tight end or a fullback or a linebacker, and now they just say, well, he could be a lineman because we don't have any.
Yeah.
And that's the situation I was in. I was at a small school, and so as I grew through, through schools, I mean, my school was so small, I ended up being a lineman because I was just, I was coachable, and so if I knew how to get in between the ball and a defender. You know what I mean? No matter what. I was kind of small to be a lineman, but I love linebacker and all that, and so. But I mean, my dreams were, I wanted to be a fullback. I wanted to like touch that ball. I knew I could run. I knew I could do things, but where I was at in my school, it just is like, nah, Bo, you're gonna have to do this because we got to have you. And that's where Dakota is. But when I was that age, I remember those feelings of kind of first getting out there and those first kind of contacts, and that's when I fell in love with it. Whenever you kind of. Back then the rules were a little different, you were taught, hey man, try to hurt them,
Sure, man.
Bust them up and hit them hard enough to where they don't want to come around you no more. And so that competitive thing so then it, became my own thing, and I got letters and all through high school from freshman all the way. I played varsity as a freshman in high school, and I started getting letters, for schools all over, but I always knew I was going to Clemson. I wanted, no matter what, whether. And so when it got down to the brass tacks of things at the very end of my senior year, Clemson, their numbers have to dwindle down, and so I got a basically invited walk-on thing.
Yeah, I know that.
They're like, man, they're like,
preferred walk-on.
You're right on this cusp. We'd love for you to still come. Be a walk-on, and if you do what we think you can do, I said, my high school coach told me that, he said, well, I mean, no, you need to go to this school because you got all these rides offered to you, and you can't play for Clemson. You're not fast enough to be a linebacker, and you're not big enough to be a lineman, and you're not that, so you can't. And as soon as he said you can't play for Clemson, I was like, well, that's where I'm going, period. So there was just this like. So yeah, it started with Daddy, but then it turned into like just a part of my passion of just being a Tiger my whole life and that competitive nature, and my goal was to start at Clemson, and so that's what I did. But music was always there, and I was playing music kind of on the side. But when you're playing football, it's in college D1. I mean, it's basically 7 days a week, not including they say you get a day off, but. They're going to say, well, we're going to have a meeting at least at like 12 or 1. So right in the middle of that day, so you ain't going to have no day off to go do whatever you want to do. So, music took a little back burner, but I was always still writing and singing and not studying like I should have been, Because that was, the deepest part of me was that, music. But I was so busy and so, overwhelmed with football because it's football in class and football class, so then I ended up coming to Nashville because I got hurt. I was snapping the ball, was long snapping, and I was snapping the ball 400 or 500 times a day. I wanted to be the best, and I was learning from the best. The dude before me, Bench, Elmer Bench, he was the best long snapper to ever come through Clemson. He started his freshman year and graduated, never missed a game, never had a bad snap. He could tell you how many rotations there were in the ball. He taught me.
Elmer Bench.
And he was leaving. And he was even on, I don't know if it was Sports Illustrated or it's one of those magazines. They had him on the cover, sitting on the bench with Bench on the back of him. And they talked about him being that position and him being like just this impeccable, he wasn't real big though, but when he was leaving as I was coming in to Clemson, and he was from Manning, South Carolina, which was about 15 minutes down the road from Sumter. So I got there and he said, man, if you want to, I'll work with you this summer. And really good. I'd already been long snapping through high school because again, we don't have anybody else to do it. That's how I can do it. I'll figure it out. So I did it since middle school. But he taught me the real way to do it, do it the right way. But I just did it so much, I my elbow, I still don't have cartilage in here now.
Really?
They just had to tear it all out. I woke up one day and I couldn't straighten out my arm at Clemson. It was just stuck. And Coach Bowden, he said, hey, man, he said, Brice, he said, go snap one ball. I said, all right. Went out there, snapped one ball, punt. And I mean, I about passed out because the pain through my arm just, he said, okay. He said, go to surgery in the morning. So they had me set up, had surgery the next morning. They said, man, all your cartilage is just screwed. You just completely, it's gone. But so then I started snapping left-handed. I started throwing left-handed because I was just at practice doing nothing. So I just started throwing left-handed. Well, then I worked my way back up through the depth charts to second position left-handed.
What?
Just because I was like, I'm not going to sit around. But I got good at snapping left-handed, because it didn't hurt my arm. It's this extension. It's this thing that hurt me, So this arm didn't have to extend. It just kind of guided the ball. But it is a lot of stories about that. I loved Clemson, and my goal was to start, and I did, and then I got hurt. But, man, I got to run down the hill. I got to ride the bus. I got to do the whole thing. I got to, those facilities. And, of course, the facilities now are a lot different.
Stupid now.
Yeah, it's crazy. I went there, and I'm like, what in the world, dude? I mean,
bowling alleys, golf simulators,
I mean, it's
barbershops.
It's insane.
I mean, it's that place is nuts, man. It really is.
So, yeah, it's been there. Both have been there, music and football.
I have so many questions just from what you're saying, like so many. And we'll get to music in a minute. But I just want to go down the football rabbit hole first. What was your welcome to the ACC moment?
Well, ACC, I guess that would have been. I mean, really, it was just being there because I did still have to go through like a little bit of the walk-on program for a couple of weeks, and then they just pulled me on up. They're like, all right, because it's like a 10-week program, and they're trying to make you quit. That they're just, it's 4:00 in the morning every day. It's just. I mean, I might as well be Navy SEAL boot camp. I mean, it's just crazy. So ACC, just being at a school like that. Learning the kind of depth that you had to pull from to get through that kind of physical, mental endurance was kind of that, and then, but I remember, my first game, it wasn't really ACC. We were actually playing Furman, we played Furman a lot, first game of the season or homecoming or whatever. I remember I went out and my first snap, and my first time running down the hill and the whole thing. And I remember running down the hill and looking up and going, man.
How'd your dad react?
I mean, well, they was just, they were there every time, every moment, all the time. And, I wasn't with him, obviously, he's over there. But he's kind of reserved like me, He's like, but that's when he stood up and he's proud. I'm proud of his son, Of course, I'm standing there. We take a picture after the game and I'm standing beside Corey Holsey, and he's like, 6'7", 3. They said he was like 340 pounds. Not even close. He was
400.
Yeah, I mean, this guy he was a giant. But still, I did my thing. But yeah, I mean, I remember that first snap that I had to go out and do. It was just like I remember that feeling.
So it's against Furman.
Yeah.
Was your first snap against Furman? Okay.
Yeah, and it was a punt, and I could do it. I mean, I don't look when I snap. I had punters that would tell you, oh, I want it up here. Or I had a couple different punters that one wanted it down low or 2 steps out in front of him, to the right, a foot, and I could put it anywhere. But when I got out there, I was like, I couldn't feel my hands. I couldn't feel. I mean, those nerves just, and it's like. And it really does. People just don't, they don't talk about the long snapper.
Unless you screw up.
Which I didn't. Now, I didn't have the fastest snap I'd ever had in my life, but it was there. And so I was like, oof, I'm going to have to learn how to get through this mental aspect of the game time, the situation, and not, But that was a scary moment, but that was the first moment I went, oh, Lord. But I loved running down the field, though. And I remember there was one guy. There was one guy I can't even remember. It went by so fast. But I was I was in on the tackle even on that. I mean, one guy tried to block me, I shut him off, and I was about the second person to kind of reach the returner, and Daddy was, I remember he said, hey, you got in on the tackle. I was like, yeah. So I just felt proud, even though, it was just a game against Furman, and but just being in that stadium, I mean, you've had to have been there and seen.
Oh, I've been there a million times. Yeah, it's amazing.
It's kind of overwhelming, and so that's first memory I had out there, that rock and that whole deal.
So cool. I imagine you guys went to Death Valley when you were a little boy too.
Yeah.
Who was your hero? Like, who was your Clemson hero?
I saw a bunch of players coming up, but I always looked back at those teams, and I kind of wasn't. Even when I was a kid, I'd look back at Perry, like the refrigerator,
sure,
and I thought, man, and Daddy would talk about a couple people, but he'd talk about, he said, he'd talk about how fast he was and how he could go sideline to sideline, even though he was a 400-pound giant, And I just always thought, people like that. In fact, I just met a guy the other day that was bouncing at one of my big shows, and he was a big security guard, and he's like, yo, yeah, I played for this team, this NFL team, and this NFL team. And I could tell, he's big dude. He's probably 6'6", At the time, he looked like he was about, 315 pounds. And he said, yeah, I ran a 4.47, And I was like, he was a defensive lineman. I said, a 4. It's just crazy, the talent. But it kind of started with those big boys back then, being able to move like that. And then meeting Emery Smith when he was leaving and I was coming in, and I was in there working out with Emery, Emmett's little brother, but he's actually bigger. This dude's big. But I watched all those guys, but I don't know why, but the refrigerator Perry was always a big thing to me. It was I just remember going, and that's kind of why I fell in love with defense too. I love to see him smashing faces.
So, and he's iconic too for guys our age.
Yeah.
When he went and scored in the Super Bowl, the whole Walter Payton thing and all that.
Yeah.
But, so football ends. All right. What year was that? So, how far into your career were you when that happened?
So we're 2 years in. So I was there, Tommy West, last year, right, for that. That's when I walked on, did the whole thing. And then Bowden came in. Mm-hmm. Tommy Bowden came in and had the big flip over. And I remember when we had our first big team meeting, and he came in, and one of the kind of high-profile players, defensive back or whatever, came in, and he was sitting in the front row, and he had his little puppy. He was sitting there with him, And Bowden came in and was like, so who are you? And he's like, I'm so-and-so. He said, and who's that? He's like, well, this is, Cha-Cha or whatever. He said, well, either both of y'all or Cha-Cha's got to go now. This is a football team meeting. And I was like, yes. So he immediately kind of laid down some
culture shift.
Yeah, it was which is what I was missing the prior year, because I watched running backs and I watched people at practice that were great, but come game time, it was these big names that were playing that really were not. I knew even in practice, I'm like, just looking at them run and seeing, it was just a lot of politics and stuff, and I liked the fact he said, look, you practice, you play. You're going to play if you're winning in practice. You know what I mean? And I like that. That's how football should be. And even my Dakota, my little boy now, he's had some parents say, man, this coach, he's kind of he's mean and da-da-da, and we don't. So I went and met him, and he said, and he was like, I said, hey, Dakotas, they have to have apps now and stuff to chat and make sure.
That's crazy.
I'm going, I don't know when that happened, but either way, I'm like, hey, coach, I said, Coda's stressing a little bit. He's wanting to make sure he's doing everything right and all this, and we're having trouble getting these apps working and stuff. He said, oh, don't worry about that. He said, we'll get that fixed. He said, come here with me. And he said, all I expect from these boys is all the effort they can give me. He said, I just want effort from them. And I said, well, duh. He came in and did a meeting, and I heard him talk, and he talked like a coach that I had.
Yep.
And I'm going, I don't know about y'all, but I love this coach. I mean, they're like, well, I mean, he yelled at him in a game.
Good.
I'm like, well, did they do something that they shouldn't? You know what I mean?
We were talking about this. I was talking about this with a buddy of mine, man. So I grew up an athlete too, and back in the day, I mean, if our kids now were coached the way we were coached,
dude,
the coaches would be under the jail.
Under it. My coaches came out in full pads one day and said, all right.
I can relate.
And I went, oh,
Yep.
wow. Ooh. Now that coach isn't coming, is he? He played for Clemson defensive line, no teeth. I'm like, uh-oh. But yeah, I mean, you're right. And so I said, you can't, there's so much I could go on about that, about a lot of athletics and the kids coming up these days, that, playing soccer or this or that. Like, well, we don't keep score. I'm like, what? No, it's 11-1. And you know what I mean? Or, well, we all have to, like, all 100 teams have to have the same jerseys and pants this year, because we had complaints that some of the other jerseys and names of teams were cooler than the others.
Lee,
And
we're going to have to stop this interview
lost
now.
my mind. I'm like, guys,
I appreciate you coming out, man. I got to be done with this shit.
What are we teaching these kids?
Here's the thing, man.
What are they learning from that?
I tell my children all the time, they're so tired of hearing, you lose in this life so much more than you win. So take the loss, learn from it,
Yes.
be better, repurpose it as fuel to win next time.
Yes.
And I struggle so badly with coddling. I struggle
Yeah.
so badly
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
participation stuff.
Yeah.
Like, just, you're going to lose. When you get to corporate America, or sure as hell
Period.
when you get to Nashville, Tennessee, and you're one of the best singers in town, and 9 different labels tell you, you suck, go be a gym teacher. No offense, any gym teachers,
Right,
that's not what
right,
this is about.
right.
Get out of here. You're never going to make it in this town.
Really, even before that, the kids that are so young, when they're like, you're going to get to a teacher's going to yell at you in high school. When you get to college, they are not going to care
Yep.
if you come to class or not.
That's right.
You're going to lose if you don't. And I mean, so there's just so much. I'm like, I tell Sarah, my wife, I'm like, look, I want to encourage all the time. But I'm also teaching. We got to teach things like you're talking about. It's like, we can't teach. You're going to win all the time, and you're a winner all the time, and you are a great person if you choose to be a great person all the time. But there's so many things in life that you daggum sure ain't gonna. I mean, I was beat down for a long time. I still have to, like, grind every day at my job. If I didn't, there's going to be somebody today, that's going to step in and take my place.
Same here.
So, yeah. So that whole thing, I was like, y'all, I don't know about y'all, but I love this coach, and y'all are terrible parents, I guess. Yeah. They hurt his feelings on me. Well, good. But like, my coach yelled at me, and he loved me. He loved me. I was the most coachable. I did everything that, like, I possibly. But I mean, if I screwed up, Brice, what? And I mean, it might embarrass me. You might not know, but I'm like, yes, sir. You're right. I screwed up. It won't happen again. You know what I mean? Like,
we still talk all the time. I'm Uncle Rico, bro. Okay, like I am, and when I was a senior in high school, we won state, went undefeated. It's still. I've been so blessed in my life, but that's still one of those things. It's on my list of things that are my favorite moments in my life. I'm a dad. I'm a husband.
Yeah.
I have an amazing job. A lot of friends. That state championship is still there. Okay,
yeah, it's up
and
there.
Some of my best friends are still those guys. We still talk about
absolutely
our coach calling us things.
Oh yeah.
That
I mean,
our mamas would have been like, "What?
Yeah.
But it's just awesome.
Yeah.
It grew us up.
It grew you up a little bit. It was time to grow up.
Yeah.
You were growing into men, right? Starting at, say, where Dakota's at now, 12 years old. Just turned 13. He's 13 years old. I saw a little bit of hair under his arm.
Oh, Lord. Better get some deodorant on that boy.
I'm like, you were wearing your helmet, huh? I can see a couple pimples right here and right here on that shin, I said, you better listen to your mama, wash that head good now. You're going to be at school, But yeah, but they're starting to grow up, and this is when they really, really got to start learning. But, for me, when that earlier on, when they were like, we don't keep score, and we all have to wear the same jerseys, and that, I was like, what are you talking about? So anyway.
So I love you talking about having to grind every day, even still. How do you carry your athletic experience every day now in the competitive arena as an artist?
I mean, it's like right now, the stage, I could maybe compare that to like, it's hard for that because that's fun, but I also give it like 100%. Even when, maybe if I'm tired and I've had 5 days in a row of flying everywhere, doing something, and I'm worn out, and I'm like, oof, about to play tonight. But then I'm thinking about that crowd that came out here, that they've been waiting for however long for me to be there. So I'm gonna suck it up. I'm gonna get up there, and I'm not gonna just suck it up and get through it. I'm gonna give them everything I got. And so that applies in a lot of things. Like, we had to play until 12 or 1. We got to bed at 3. Well, we got to be up at 4, to go to the airport.
To roll, yeah.
To go through security, to fly 6 hours, to get off the plane, to take an hour drive, to go do sound check, and then do a show an hour later, and then do that 7 days in a row all across the country, or 10 days in a row, and not see the family. It's a lot of times it feels like it's not just fourth quarter, but like this is like overtime, and like you ain't got nothing left, but you got to find it from somewhere. And that relates a lot into my business. It's not as much about the stage, because most of the time the stage, even if I am tired, like that adrenaline kicks in, and
sure.
that's why there's that fun part. There's the fun part. You know what I mean? When you crawl up in the hole and linebacker and you smoke somebody and the crowd goes crazy, that's the fun part. You know what I mean? But the hard work and practice, and they're like, nah, we're not practicing today. Get on the line, start running, turn the lights on, keep running. Whatever it may be. Like that's the not fun part that you learn to mentally and physically. Your mind has to be stronger than your body a lot of times. It has to make your body do things that your body didn't think it could do. Take one more step. Play one more play. That's really what the biggest comparison of my job and like being on the road and all that stuff has to do with it, and just continuing to grind and then continue. I mean, like I said, if I stopped right now, I could go play shows and I could do stuff for probably the rest of my life, but to be at a level where I'm at, and I'm continuing to, I still have plenty of aspirations of more at this point, but somebody would step right in, and take my starting position.
I want to discuss the aspirations in a minute, but let's back up now. So, ball's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When does Nashville enter the picture?
Okay.
Why did Nashville enter the picture? And what were your dreams when you made that decision?
I mean, so I was actually in the next year, going into my third year of football. We were at spring. But we had spring break, and we only had a couple days that we could take for spring break for football. But I took we had those 3 days or whatever it was, and instead of like going to the beach and doing stuff that everybody does at spring break, I said, man, I want to go visit Nashville. And so a buddy of mine, we just jumped in the truck and we came up and we visited Nashville. Now I had just gotten over, I'd been hurt.
Drove from Clemson.
Yeah, just drove from Clemson. Drove up here, and I'd been hurt, and I realized that I was not going to be able to snap the ball ever again like I did before. I could, but it was like blackout pain if I did. So I knew that was just kind of like that part of my life was probably over. So, but I didn't really come to that conclusion until I came to Nashville for spring break. Knew a couple people up here. We stayed on their couch. And I rode around, went and saw a couple of these write-arounds and stuff. You see songwriters playing in bars and stuff, and I immediately was just like, this is where I'm supposed to be. And I had been in civil engineering, 3 or 4 years now in Clemson. Daddy had an electrician business back home. I had options, but I was like, there was no doubt. I was like, this is what's been calling me since I was 2 years old at that piano, and playing in church and playing at all the gigs and playing 8-hour gigs by myself with a guitar and for $50 or a meal or something. This is where I've got to be, and that's what happened. I really got really fortunate. And in those few days that I was here, I was in Nashville here, and I met a couple people, and I met one guy, Doug Johnson, and I played some stuff for him. And he said, man, I don't know if your daddy would appreciate me saying this to you. He said, because I know my daddy wouldn't. He said, but I just got to tell you the truth. He said, I see a lot of people coming to town and looking for deals and this and that and da-da-da-da. And I was just playing. I played him a few songs I wrote, and I sang them, and just me and the guitar. And he said, but you need to be here, and you need to be here now. Like tomorrow.
How'd you react?
I was like, really? He said, put it this way. And this guy ran record labels, still runs record labels, writes hit songs, produces many hit songs you've heard, A&R, publishing, done it all, knows this town, been all over it, done it all. And he said, man, if you come to this town, I will work with you. You will be my number one priority for as long as you want me to be. And I was like, wow. So
that doesn't happen. Okay, so
yeah,
this is a 10-year town,
dude. It still was a 10-year town after that.
Yeah.
But he was there, and he was honest with me up front. He said, I'm gonna teach you things, and we're gonna learn this bit, so that when you hit that road and when you have that first single, you'll be ready. You're not gonna just get out there and hope it happens. Let's do our prep work. And so it's still a 10-year town, and that was with me finding somebody the very first basically day I visited. So fast forward a day or two, I head back to Nashville. Basically called Daddy on the way. I was like, hey, Daddy, I think I've found where I'm going to be. I think I want to move to Nashville. And I only had a year left, if that, at Clemson, to have my civil engineering degree. And I said, so I think I'm just going to move to Nashville, and football's over for me. And now he said, do what? I don't know if your daddy said, do what?
Of course, that's a country as hell. Do what
said,
now? Do what now?
Now, did I hear that correct? Do what? I said, well, and I talked to him a little bit. He said, well, how about this? He said, why don't you, finish out the semester, and why don't you go up there and visit and live there for the summer and really see how you feel about it, and before you decide to not go back next year and finish up. I said, all right. I said, yes, sir. That sounds like, it makes sense. But I got back to Clemson, and I was there for a week or two. I mean, at the most, going to classes and not going to classes and thinking about Nashville. And one day I just put all my stuff in my truck and I just took off.
Didn't tell Dad.
I didn't. I didn't tell nobody. My roommates, all my friends.
You just bounced.
They're going, Lee, where
Ghosted
you at?
them.
Where are you at? I was like, man, I'm in Nashville, dude. They're like, what? What do you mean you're in Nashville? I said, yeah, dude, I'm gone. I'm out. I'm in Nashville. So it worked out, but Daddy supported me.
What year is this?
This is 2001.
01. Okay.
2001. And came up, and I did spend the summer there. And spent the summer, and then Daddy came up. It's actually really crazy, but Daddy came up on September 9th or 10th, and on the 10th, he co-signed for me for my first permanent apartment, and we went to the little furniture store, and he helped me get a couch and like a bed, and we moved the stuff in and get the bed put together, and had a little couch in there and a little TV I had. And he stayed the night, him and Mama. And he woke me up the next morning. I actually had a co-write plan, and he woke me up the next morning early and was like, Lee, get in here. And the buildings were coming down. So my first permanent day in Nashville was September 11th,
20 years ago this
20
weekend.
years ago this weekend. And so that was, it was, I don't even know what that meant. It was just, and it didn't mean anything other than what it meant, but I just, in fact, it was kind of strange because I didn't think about that. The correlation of that was my first day in Nashville permanently until really a few years later. I thought back when I said, you know what, that was actually my first day. Because I had been here, like I said, the summer and, through that rest of that spring, but like living different places and like living on couches and, borrowing a room for a month, But that was that was something it was almost like my mind just kind of blocked it out for a couple years, and I was kind of getting settled into Nashville. But that's when I just was here and I was writing music but the change from football to that was the fact that I visited here, and immediately I knew this is where I was supposed to be. There was no doubt in my mind that this is what I was going to do. And I didn't have a backup plan. I mean, Daddy always said, well, you can always come home and work. I got a whole company here and I'm ready to retire and you come take it over. And I could have done that. And I did go, I'd take, when I could, I'd leave Nashville and go down there for, a week and help Daddy put some money, just enough money to get me back and keep me here for a couple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. And I'd go back, work with Daddy a little bit, come back. But I was here writing and starting my career. But it was that visit on spring break that changed everything. It kind of really showed me, I was like, football's over, But I had met that goal, though. As a kid, I wanted to start for Clemson. I didn't want to play. I mean, my aspirations weren't to go to NFL and do this or that. My aspirations were to play for Clemson and start. And that's what I did. So, when I got hurt, it didn't crush me. At that point. I mean, I could have played a lot more football there, but I met my goals. It
worked out.
And it worked out. And I got to come up here, and now here we are talking about it.
When did it happen for you? What was the break?
Well, I mean, meeting Doug even that first day was a big thing, like I said. But and he went over, and so shortly after that, he went over to Curb Records, and he took me with him, basically. So I kind of had a record deal and a publishing deal right there. But I was just writing, and then I was, I'd go play shows, but I wrote a lot. And I started to make a record with Doug, and we made it for years. We made that first record that came out, I think it was like 2010 it came out. I had been making that record since 2002.
Wow.
I've been making records 7.5 years, you know what I mean? 7 years. They put out a single and it'd go like top 30 or top 40 or something, and then put out another single. But they wanted a single to be up on, top 10 or something before we put the album out. So I had 5 or 6 songs I had on radio before I ever had Love Like Crazy that came out, which was my first hit. I mean, it was a big hit song, and that was kind of a big break for me because that got me. I mean, I was on the road a few years before that with my first singles. I was out there busting it, but that's a whole nother part of it. This is where I was in a van, had a band, driving through the nights, rough.
What's that grind like?
Renting a U-Haul trailer every 4x7, setting up all of our stuff, playing till 2 or 3 a.m., driving through the night, taking turns, sleeping on the floor or the benches, getting to the next place. You talking about wearing yourself out. I mean, for years, that's what I had to do. And then Love Like Crazy came out, and I was able to get my first bus. It didn't have air conditioning in it, but it was a bus and a bed, and I could go to sleep. I had a driver that drove the bus. So that made a big difference.
Bunch of bunks, you and the boys all in there together?
Yeah, 12 bunks in there. Yeah. We're piled up in there, everybody. But that grind was a pretty big one, and that's kind of where just my whole life of competition and pushing the extra mile and all that stuff kind of started working for me because we did it the hard way coming up because we did that on purpose too. A lot of people could have gone, you go to these companies and they'll say, yeah, take a bus, go on out there and go do your thing. Got nothing, maybe you got a song on the radio, maybe you don't, but 2 years later you're $2 million in debt.
Right.
So then if you ever do make money, you got to pay all that back before you ever make any money. My thing was with my manager, and he's a lot like me. He was raised in Texas and just a good old boy, Enzo DiVincenzo. He's an Italian now, but he was raised in Texas. And so he knew he had a few other artists, but they were all Texas artists, and they all grind. They build a crowd, from nothing to something to bigger, so that you have a fan base that nobody can take away from you.
Yeah, in Texas.
It ain't like a
Randy Rogers, Jason Boland, all those guys.
He managed all them.
Yep.
But he had never managed like a national act.
Yep.
He managed those guys. And so I was the first one he signed. And I went with him. I had a lot of offers because at this time I'd had this record going. All Nashville knew about me. Been waiting on the record to come out. Love Like Crazy comes out. It's big. He's like, and I had an option. I could have gone with any manager, big ones from all over, New York, LA, all over. But I met Enzo. I just saw not a car salesman. I saw somebody who was going to be real honest with me and work hard and do it the right way. And that's just how we did it. And so I was like, hey, that sounds fine with me. Maybe there's some people who wouldn't want to go out there and grind. They don't want to go out there and grind like that, But that's all I knew anyway. So I was just come off of football. I mean D1 football. I'm like I can handle it. You know what I mean? So and we're still grinding again. Like I say, we're still grinding today. I mean we had to we downsized. We had 3 buses and 2 trucks out and all this stuff, and we had to downsize, and now we're piled up in there. Got people sleeping on couches, and at least we got buses.
Because of COVID?
Yeah, because of COVID. That all last year, and a year and a half of no shows, but we still had our nose to the grindstone, finding some shows somewhere. Even if they were weird shows, spread out and all the stuff, we were still doing them. I talked to some artists recently that I'm like, it's been awesome being back like 6 weeks, and even through COVID. So we've been back. I've had I think we're gonna have 67 shows in 90 days. Wow. And I talked to an artist the other day. He says, "Yeah, this is my 4th show in 2 years," and I'm like, I don't even understand how
How do they pay any bills? I don't.
Yeah, I mean that, and just sitting around there was already plenty of time at home. You know what I mean? But yeah, I guess it's just different. I mean, I grew up with the work ethic of that. Let's get it. We're gonna work. I ain't here to play around.
Somewhere in that time frame before that first record came out, Garth Brooks cut More Than a Memory.
Yes. Yeah.
How did that unfold? Did he happen to call you, hear it on the radio? That must have been quite a moment.
Yeah, and it was it was a moment, and it was also
validation in a way.
A big shot in the arm for me in a good way, a foot in the door. And a lot of people to this day, because of that, they're like, well, we know you came to town to be a songwriter, and then you decided you want to be an artist. I'm like, well, no, that's not the truth. So I came here to sing. I just happened to get a couple of cuts on other artists first, and so it looks like that. And I said, that's fine. But yeah, I was writing songs for me. I was writing songs for my first record still, and we had put out my first single, She Ain't Right, and I was like, man, I just wrote this song, and I was going to put it out, and I got a call from Garth.
He called you?
Yeah.
Dude, how'd that go?
I was going through the airport. I was out on the road, kind of grinding through this thing, and I had to fly to go see a radio station. We're doing a thing called a radio tour, where I'm going around and meeting every radio station in the country. Sometimes 2 or 3 a day, with 2 or 3 flights in between different cities and all that. Well, I was in an airport, and I was going through, and I was actually putting my stuff on the belt to go through the security, and my phone rang, and It was actually my buddy's number. I was like, hey, man. He said, hey, Lee. And I was like, well, that's not Kyle. He said, hey, it's Garth. And I was like, Garth who? like, what do you mean it's Garth?
Yeah.
Like, he said, it's Garth. Hey, how are you doing? I said, what? I said, and they were pushing me. They were like, sir, I was like, Garth, I gotta go. I'll call you right back. And I had to like hang up on Garth.
Oh my gosh.
And now, if you gotta remember now, this is something I left out of this whole story. Is my whole life, Garth was a really, really big. Like I looked like when I heard his music, when I first started hearing music other than church music, Garth was a big one for me. Just hearing how he connected on the radio, the songs were different. It was all of the things about Garth I just was a real huge fan of. So I'm a mega fan, and hang up the phone, and like my instinct, I don't know why, I was like, and I just like yelled out to the whole airport. I said, Garth Brooks just called me. People are looking up like, what are you talking about?
Security, we got a guy, we got a druggie over
I'm
here.
like, you don't understand. So I get over there, get my phone, I call, hey. He's like, hey, man. I said, I'm so sorry, I had to. He said, oh no. He said, man, I just, I heard this song, and he said, I know you're writing for your record, and I would never want to, impose on that. He said, but I just wanted to see what you thought about, about me recording the song, and I was like thinking it. At that moment, I was like, man, this is like really personal song to me. And then he's like, I didn't say it out loud, but I was like, and then he's like, and I want to put it as a single, and I'm like. Like a single, and I'm
that's
like,
life-changing money.
Yeah,
for those of you watching and listening, you got to understand, it's life-changing money.
Yeah, I'm broke. Okay, completely broke. I mean, I'm in a van. I mean, I'm barely making enough money to put gas in the van to get to the next show. And then he said, and I said, I mean, and before he's like, and actually, I want to put it out like now, like as my first single off this next record. And I was like, yeah. I was like, 100,000%, please go. He's like, man, he said, are you sure? I said, yeah. I said, Garth, are you kidding me? And he's like, well, listen, here's what I'll do. I'll go record it, and I'll make sure I play it for you, so that you tell me if you like it or not, before I do anything with it or put it out or anything. I said, Garth, I said, you've sold like 125 million albums. I think you know how to record a song.
It'll be done fine.
I think it's gonna be all right. You're just kidding me. So it changed my life, and that was 2007,
yeah.
7, and then into 8, and I was, like I said, I was on the road. And so now when I started going into radio stations, instead of just a guy coming in with a new song from Curb Records, they're like, oh, hey, Lee, man, Garth, this new song. So he put the song out, it debuted at #1, which had never been done in history.
Right, that's unprecedented, right?
Yeah, and I'm like, and I, me in the competitive spirit, I'm like, I got a record that can never be broken.
Yeah, that's right.
It can be tied, but it can't be broken. So it kind of really changed people starting to look at me, how because they see artists coming in every day, radio stations, and now it's even way more because now people just mail. I mean, there's so many people off the internet making their own little records, and some of them are really, really good or whatever, and got a ton of followers and all this stuff. So now radio is even more bombarded with content and so many people, numbers of people. But that kind of got me up on their radar of going, well, this guy, he wrote. Now they're saying, well, he wrote all his own stuff too, and he's writing for Garth, and Eli Young Band recorded a song right in that
Crazy
same time.
Girl, right?
Yeah, and it was a song of the year.
I mean,
so
that
now I
thing's
got
a monster.
So then that's why. And then we put out Love Like Crazy, 2009. It takes a whole year on the radio, which at the time was the longest song on the radio, on the charts. It was 57 weeks.
That's crazy.
So I now had the fastest rising single and the slowest rising single in history. So it gave radio a lot to talk about, and so that was that big foot in the door. But yeah, Garth, that was a big one for me back in 2007.
And now, I mean, you have all these awards. You know, you got ACMs. You and Carly Pierce just got a CMA together into last year. How do you even rationalize the ride?
You know,
and how hard is it in the middle of the grind to appreciate it?
Well, it's both. It's. I mean, you always appreciate it. You know, I look up and and my wife will call me and go, Lee, I just went to the grocery store and I mean it was like $300 for groceries, and I'm like, she's like, I just want to tell you, and I'm like, so, and then every day if I'm at meet and greet, and I'm like, I hear some story from somebody that puts me in perspective every time, and really the awards, I mean, they're still kind of surreal. Like even the moment with Garth and that song, that whole thing is still surreal to me. It's like it almost doesn't feel real sometimes. It's so cool, me and Carly just won 2 CMA awards this year, and I'm going, I mean, and it was in the presence, in the same category with really heavy hitting people that win all the time, every one. And I was up for a Grammy when a song I produced on my own that I wrote for my wife's our wedding, and I mean, we've had a lot of stuff. I got to go play. Garth was getting inducted for the Gershon Award, which is this really special award out of Washington, and so we were at the Library of Congress, and they had this big huge show, and it was like a tribute to him, and I mean, it was insane. I mean, and I got asked to go play one of his songs. How'd that happen? Well, he asked me to come.
Garth
play.
asked you?
Yeah.
Okay.
He was like, hey, would you want to come play? And the other guys that were there were only like 4 other cats there. Sang some of his songs. But out of all of them, I was the only one that got to sing a Garth song that I wrote. And so it was really special. And there's been moments like that, and I just played the Ryman the other night and sold it out, and it was nuts. It was just, there's moments like that where I just stand there. And lately, getting back out on the road after COVID, and now crowds I can hear them and feel them, I'm just like, oh, I just stand there and just kind of take it in and go. I still just feel that blessing of like, this is crazy. I get to do what I love, even though, like I said, like right now it's pretty rough. I mean, this has been the longest time. In the last 7 weeks, I've been home for like 24 hours, and I got 3 kids at home with a wife, and that don't fly real. It's hard to deal with both. It's hard to deal with. I'm missing the kids. My wife needs me, they need me, but I also got to catch up from last year, and so I'm trying to balance it all, and then also physically and just mentally, traveling that much, being gone that much, it's just taxing, and so it's been difficult, but it just flips whenever, you see both sides of it, every day, but
I can relate. This morning, I live in Charlotte. This morning flying here was my 8th plane since Saturday.
Yeah.
I have 3 kids. I've been married 21 and a half years. And so I know, isn't it such an interesting dichotomy between, Lord, thank you so much for blessing me with every dream I ever had professionally, for 3 beautiful, healthy children, for an amazing marriage, and a selfless wife who puts up with this shit. Mm-hmm. But wow, I just want to see them more.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's yeah. Anybody listening, for those of you who are blue collar folks who bust your tails 48 hours a week working 412s, we love you and we appreciate you. This is not meant to sound like in any way that we're ungrateful, because we're not. But the work's the planes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it really is. And I've done, and we've both done. I mean, I grew up doing those weeks of that work, and I know that feeling. I think some of the work is, and especially now in my life and my kids at their ages, is a lot of it's keeping yourself in your inside
centered, man.
Yeah, keeping yourself here. That's kind of what can wear you out, and more than physically, even. But But I'm still overall, like I said, I never complain about it. Not a day, you know, and even if you feel like you want to go, God, I just want to be home with my kids instead of being out on this road, you know.
There is, I heard something recently, and Coach Saban, I interviewed Coach Saban this past Saturday morning on my show before they played Miami. And he reminded me of something that Ernie Johnson, you know who Ernie is? He hosts NBA Today or NBA, whatever it's called, on TNT with Shaq and Barkley and Kenny Smith. He spoke to the Alabama football team recently, and he said, I have a get-to job, not a got-to job. And you talk about perspective.
Yeah.
You and me got get-to jobs.
That's true. That's
and what a blessing that is.
Absolutely.
All right, I'm going to let you get to your family. I want to just say one more thing before I let you go. You cut, so speaking of stories about your songs, okay? One of my favorite moments with my best friend, who is Eric Church, was many moons ago. I was sitting in his living room, and we were drinking way too much wine. And he goes, sit down. And I said, all right. I said, what are you doing, dude? We sat down on the floor of his house, and he turned on, for the very first time I'd ever heard it, and I don't know if anybody had ever heard it before that other than his wife, Catherine. He played me Life Off My Ears.
Oh, man.
And to this day, hearing that demo that night is one of the most special moments I've ever had with him. I got up and I was pumping I got this red wine in my hand. I'm pumping my fist in the air. I'm like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard. And they had these white curtains. And let's just say red wine and white curtains is a problem, Lee.
That's awesome.
I was thrilled all those years ago when you did cut it. That song, I love that song.
I love that song too. That was one of my favorites, and we did it live a lot too. And we've actually been talking lately about pulling out some stuff and putting it back in the new sets, keeping things fresh. And that would be one that people love that song because it's got so much truth in it. And Eric, man, he's a great writer. So, you know, good dude.
Look, man, thank you. I appreciate you being here so much. Thanks for sharing your story with us. I could go on for days, man.
Yeah, we'll talk sports later.
We'll talk sports later. We'll have to have you back and talk sports later. Right. Lee Brice, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate you, brother.
Go Tigers.
The man hung up on Garth Brooks. First of all, I can't imagine what it was like for him when he heard Garth on the phone. It was funny listening to him kind of recall that moment. But second, hey, Garth, I got to hang up, dude. I'm going through airport security. I don't think I would have hung up on Garth Brooks. I think I would have just sat there and let security wait on me. Amazing story. And it's fun to hear where he wants this thing to go, how he's nowhere close to done, how he's using that athletic background to make sure that he stays hungry. And Lord, what a schedule he has coming. He's on the road a lot here coming up. And hearing him discuss that constant work-life balance that so many of us manage every single day, myself included. How you want to be the most engaged and present husband and father possible, but the job calls. And you're so passionate about what the job is. That's a very difficult balance for a lot of us. I know a lot of y'all out there listening can relate. Appreciate Lee coming in here. There's so much more I want to discuss with him. I got a lot more I want to know about his Clemson football career, and a lot more I want to know about where he wants this thing to go, about what kind of music he wants to make, what it's like to stick to your guns and make the songs that you want to make versus what some other people may tell you should make. Been really interesting to spend this time with him. So thanks to Lee for coming out. Thank you guys so much for listening. I want y'all to know the feedback to this podcast continues to shock us, all of us here at Outsider. Thank you so much for your devotion and taking the time to listen. We love hearing the feedback on social media. I was just in the airport today, and a guy pulled me aside to discuss how he was moved by our episode with comedian John Christ. So thanks to all you guys for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review. Please tell your friends about it. If it moves you, it has the potential to move other people. It certainly matters to us. So thank y'all for listening to the Marty Smith Podcast here at Outsider Studios. We have a lot of great shows coming up with amazing songwriters like Casey Beathard and other artists like Chase Rice that you're going to want to hear. Thank you. Have an awesome day. We appreciate y'all.